Welcome to Best Served Cold, a Ball Millennials podcast, where we drink wine and talk about crime.
Presented to you by Tama J and Laura Lease. Hello. How is everybody doing? We hope everybody's staying safe. All your relatives are fine, your elderly relatives, your grandparents, all that jazz. Dark times and weird times we currently live in with the whole quarantine thing. But great for myself and my partner Laura, who you also know from the Ball Millennials podcast. Say hello, Laura.
Hi. Hi.
We're starting a new thing.
This was my idea.
This was your idea. We are going to get interrupted by...
Oh, this kitten. You may have just heard her. She's very mischievous. She does not like being told what to do, much like me. And she will make very vocal protests when you try and make her behave. Again, much like me.
She's, I think, currently 13 weeks. Very young, very squealy, very naughty.
Very squealy. Very squealy.
Her name is Peach because she's short and fuzzy.
And sweet. She's a peach.
She's very sweet, but she's also a fucking nuisance.
Very naughty. Very, very naughty.
Like I was saying, welcome to our new podcast. Still in the Ball Millennials forum. Ball Millennials is kind of like the parent group of all these different shows that will be within the Ball Millennials format. One way or another, it will feature myself and most likely Laura. Just this version of the podcast will be just myself and Laura, where we get a bit more deep, you know. We get a bit more deep into some real hard-hitting content. So this whole show, the entire process and the premise is, I guess, essentially sort of inspired from the My Favorite Murder podcast.
Well, yeah, that's one of my favorite. I nearly said My Favorite Murders, my favorite podcasts. But I think it's going to be, we're going to do a little bit more like true crime, but also maybe like conspiracy theories. Yeah. That sort of
maybe
stuff.
Just move.
She's making a move for that table again.
Maybe just move those bowls if you can while I'll explain the show a bit more in a bit clearly. So Laura will be delving into murder mysteries. I guess just delving into grand mysteries, into, you know, crimes that were solved, crimes that weren't solved, things that no one has any friggin' clue on, and then things that were just peculiar. While I will be taking a deep dive into specific serial killers. So I'll be looking into just every single aspect of who they are, like their early lives, what caused them to be a killer, the extent of their killing reign, as well as just other general thoughts and discussions on them as individuals and you know, facts about them that not everyone really knows about, I suppose. So without further ado, with everything said, let's kick everything off. So we have, what are we talking about?
It's a very professional intro.
Thank you.
Well done.
What are you discussing with us today?
So today I'm going to talk about a story that I did hear for the first time on My Favorite Murder. So I guess I am sort of like, there's nothing new in what I'm telling. I guess just the way I'm going to tell the story. But it's the story of Daniel LaPlante, which I have told you before, I believe.
Briefly have mentioned to me. Yeah.
I just think it's horrific, and it's like my worst nightmare. Like, I won't tell you, obviously, without spoiling the ending. But the end of this story is like one of my worst nightmares.
Yeah. So. It is quite frankly terrifying and horrific. Let's jump into it, boys.
So am I going first?
Yeah, you go first. Let's go first.
All right. So I've got my little notes here because I can basically remember the story off by heart.
Yeah,
because
best to have something here to go
with. It's kind of worn into my memory, but There's
just
lots of
never-
details.
It never leaves you.
No, it really doesn't. Not a story like this.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit of a backstory about Daniel
Please do.
first. Also, I just want to make the point known that I don't believe that just because you have a horrific childhood and a really terrible start to your life, excuses terrible actions. But I do think it's interesting when you look at all these serial killers, so many of them have either traumatic childhoods
Yeah.
or traumatic head injuries is a big thing as well with serial killers.
Some sort of pattern.
Yeah.
With a lot of these people.
Yeah. Okay, so story set in the 70s. Oh, no, the 80s, sorry. He was born in Massachusetts in America, obviously, in the 1970s. So there's not a lot of details available on his childhood because he has multiple personality disorders, so it's kind of difficult to get concrete information from him, but it was a pretty traumatic childhood. It's known that he suffered physical, sexual, and psychological abuse from his father, who was the main offender. There were other people in his life. I don't think his stepmother was particularly nice to him, but his father was the main offenders, which obviously led to him having troubles at school, both academically and socially, because that's stuff
just
has
hand
to
in hand.
yeah, that stuff's going to fuck with you and make you a bit of a weirdo.
Totally, yeah.
He was diagnosed with dyslexia, which back in the 80s I think would be terrible to have something like dyslexia.
Yeah, it was one of those times where things like that were considered taboo and weird. Why can't you just be this?
Yeah, just be normal,
Yeah.
quote. Kids referred to him as creepy and weird, which if you see a photo of him, he really looks like the weird kid in class. We don't have school shootings, isn't really a thing in Australia.
No,
But he looks like if you were at a school in Australia, he would be a kid where you'd be like, if we had school shootings, it'd be you.
yeah.
Anyway,
Pause the podcast right now to look up
Daniel
photo of him.
LaPlante.
Daniel LaPlante.
He's so
a photo
creepy
of him
looking.
right now.
He's also kind of sad looking. He has sad eyes. He's
Right.
creepy, but he looks damaged. Anyway,
He's damaged
so
goods.
when he was an early teen, he was sent to a psychiatrist for obvious reasons. He was diagnosed with hyperactivity disorder, which I didn't look into much further because I didn't have time, but I'm assuming that's kind of in the same ballpark as ADD, ADHD, I would assume.
You would assume so, yeah.
Then to make matters worse, this is the part that I found really sad. So he's sent to a psychiatrist to help assist him with his horrific life, with his childhood sexual abuse. And then his psychiatrist sexually abuses him during their sessions
Which
for
is not what
years.
you want. That is really not what you
Yeah.
want.
So in his early teens, he becomes a small-time thief. He breaks into people's properties and steals valuables. This then escalates to him taking things, but also leaving things and moving things around in the house to fuck with the minds of the people. So someone would come out and see that their sofa chair had been moved and they'd know that someone's obviously been in their house. So it was kind of mind games.
Yeah. Paranormal.
Okay.
If you will.
So in 1986, Daniel LaPlante obtains a phone number, which it's not been proven, but speculated that he got the phone number from robbing the house. So found the number written. You know how people
right.
used to write your own number on the landline? Because who remembers your own phone number?
Exactly, yeah.
The phone number belonged to Annie and Jessica Andrews, who lived with their father, Brian. So Danny begins calling Annie and Jessica and talking to them over the phone. He tells them that he's a teen from a neighboring school. He tracked them down after seeing them and found them both attractive and was given their number by a friend. So this is late 80s, so they didn't have Facebook or text. So that would be the only way you would get
and it wasn't
someone's phone
considered
number.
weird to do that. Whereas nowadays it's kind of why the fuck are you calling?
I mean, it might be a little bit weird, but you wouldn't necessarily question it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 80s. There's no like you said, there's no Tinder or Grindr.
So he tells the girls that he is, quote, a good-looking, athletic blonde boy who is well educated and lives in the area, which he's definitely not. Also, I feel like it's a red flag. If you have to tell someone you're athletic and blonde, chances are you're probably not.
It's on my Tinder profile.
Also, another thing worth mentioning, which comes into play a bit shortly later, is the girl's mother had just recently passed away from cancer, which is why they just live with their dad.
Right.
So Danny chats with the girls and eventually he convinces the oldest one, Annie, to go on a date with him. Spoiler alert, it doesn't go well.
Doesn't end well, yeah.
When Danny shows up at the house, he's definitely not blonde and athletic. So obviously Annie's quite disappointed. The article I read specifically describes him as disheveled, greasy, dark-haired with no attractive features.
Oh, that is rough.
So it's not even like, oh, he's kind of ugly, but he's
Yeah.
got nice eyes.
She's
he
like
has
the Gordon
no
Ramsay-
attractive features.
Gordon Ramsay of attractive people just will fucking roast you if you are not perfect.
Mm-hmm. So Danny finds out on the date that Annie's mum has recently passed away and takes a weird interest in this. Annie later claims that it seemed as though he was obsessed with the death of her mother. He continually questioned her on how she felt the moment her mother died and how much her mother suffered, which is just like beautiful first date chat.
Yeah. Also, what size are your feet?
Like, tell me about your mother's death rattle. Like, it's just not a good time. So they're on the date for the hour, and then Annie, unsurprisingly, makes an excuse to go home, and shocker, there's no second date.
Yeah, girl, get out of there.
So,
Fuck.
because of their mother's recent passing, Annie and her sister attempt to contact their mum through a seance in the basement, which
As
is
you do.
also important.
The start of every bad horror movie ever.
Yeah. So that same evening, they hear a rhythmic knocking against their bedroom walls while they're sleeping, which is
Creepy
so
as
creepy.
fuck.
And this part's really sad. They take that as that the seance has worked, and they start talking to their dead mother, asking questions and receiving, quote, responses via knocks on the wall, which is just really sad.
Yeah.
The knocking continues over the next few nights and still until it starts to actually disturb their sleep. It's so frequent and so loud. They also notice things go missing, or things that were neatly laid out would be strung across the room, furniture would be moved, etc., etc. And so they then start to believe it's not their mother and they're actually being haunted by a demonic spirit. And unsurprisingly, they start to freak out. The girl's father believes that they're acting out due to the death of their mother and are emotionally struggling, as you would be. And of course, he doesn't believe that it's a demon haunting their house. He just thinks they're making stuff up to try and get attention.
Right.
So one evening, their father, who I believe was a bus driver, so he worked like odd hours, like shift work. So he'd work night times and stuff. So their dad's a bus driver, so he's out at weird hours.
Odd hours.
So one evening while he's out working, the knocking starts again, but this time instead of coming from the walls, because they'd been hearing it like behind the plaster of the walls, they hear it coming from the basement, which is always
Shocking.
good. So as you do, they go downstairs to the basement to investigate with a kitchen knife. Good girls. They took a knife.
Something.
When they enter the basement, they see written on the walls in blood red something, "I'm in your room, come and find me."
Fuck that.
So
Fuck that.
that's
No. I'm
horrifying.
burning the fucking house down.
Mhm.
Fuck that.
So they obviously run out of the house screaming. They go to their neighbours and wait at the neighbour's house until the dad comes home. Dad goes downstairs, sees the writing on the walls, but still thinks it's the girls doing it for attention. Makes them go to counselling, which is, to be honest, not the worst idea, regardless of
Yeah.
whether you think they're doing crazy stuff like that. So weeks later, the same thing happens. There's a knocking coming from Annie's bedroom wall where they enter the room, again in the same blood red something. It's written, "I'm back, find me if you can." So they think it's written in blood because it's like blood red something. So
substance.
again, they go running out, screaming out of the house, go to the neighbours, call dad, blah, 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 blah. Dad comes home from work. He still doesn't believe them and thinks they're making it up, but he sees how like freaked out
Shook.
the girls are and is like, this is a really elaborate lie for them to have made up. He then goes into the house to try and prove to them that there's no one inside, but he now sees another message that's been written on the wall since the girls told him what was on the wall, saying, "Marry me," on the walls of one of the girls' bedrooms. He notes that the girls didn't mention that, so obviously it's been added
While they were
since
gone.
they were out of the house. Oh, okay. this is where it gets like stuff
Fellas.
straight from my nightmares.
Take tips.
So then, oh my God, okay. So he turns around. On the other side of the room is Daniel LaPlante. He's wearing the girl's dead mother's clothing, her makeup, a blonde wig, and he's holding a hatchet. There's something just so terrifying
wrong.
about hatchets. Like
Yeah.
knives I can deal, hatchets just...
Like an axe is too big to be taken seriously, but a hatchet is like small enough where it's like,
yeah, it's a death machine.
you're a fucking psychopath.
Yeah. So Danny runs at Brian, the father. They grapple for a bit, and then Danny escapes and like seemingly vanishes into thin air. And the father can't work out how
Where
he's
he went,
disappeared so
he's just
quickly.
gone.
So this is where it gets even creepier, if that's possible. The police show up to the house. They find that the messages aren't written in blood; they're written in ketchup. They then, however, find a hidden crawl space behind the built-in cupboard in Annie's bedroom, and inside the crawl space is Daniel LaPlante hiding, which is how he managed to just seemingly vanish into thin air.
Ugh.
So once he's arrested, oh God, they find he's been living inside the fucking walls of the house for like months on end. He's tunneled through the ground and like through the walls to get to different parts of the house, and he's punctured peepholes in all the different rooms so he can like watch the girls wherever they are.
God.
Yeah.
Dude, fuck that. That
Yeah.
is just horrifying. He's a mole man.
It's my worst nightmare mostly because I do really embarrassing stuff when I feel like no one's watching.
Yeah.
But yeah. So LaPlante's arrested. He's sent to a juvenile facility where he's released in October 1987, which if you remember when I started this story, it all started in 1986.
Yeah, what the fuck?
So he's held for like, it doesn't say what month he was arrested, but he's probably only
Like
held for
6
like
months or something.
12 months at the
Yeah.
absolute maximum. So considering he tried to kill someone with a fucking hatchet, it's not long enough to have been locked away. So unsurprisingly, once he's released, he goes almost straight away back to robbing people and breaking into their homes, during which time he steals 2 handguns. And this is where it gets really sad and awful and meh. So December 1987, so literally 2 months after his release, he breaks into the Gustafson home where Priscilla Gustafson, who's only 33, and her 2 young children, Abigail and William, are living. Priscilla's husband, Andrew, is at work at the time. So when Andrew arrives home, he finds Priscilla face down on their bed, pillows splattered with blood. She'd been raped by Daniel LaPlante and then shot multiple times in the head point blank.
Jesus Christ.
Andrew then finds his 2 children. 5-year-old William was drowned in the upstairs bath, and 8-year-old Abigail was drowned in the downstairs bath. To this day, no one's really sure of the like specific motivation for the escalation because, I mean, he had a hatchet, so it wasn't looking like he was going to do great things to Annie and Jessica, but he'd never actually violently attacked someone.
It didn't seem like it would be that much of a stretch.
No,
to go
he's
that
really
far.
gone from like 0 to 100.
Fuck, man. See, that's the thing with people like this who get locked up and are let go prematurely. They don't have enough time to reconcile with themselves to change what they need to actually physically change about themselves.
Yeah, so the article I was reading speculated that up until this point in time, he'd never had like a
violent outburst,
like a violent weapon, more so.
Right.
So they think that he was too afraid to confront any of his victims when it would be like hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah.
Where with a gun, he could hold it to someone, make them stand still, tie them up, So LaPlante is really quickly implicated. Then police then mount a manhunt for him. A few towns over in Townsend, LaPlante breaks into a woman's house and kidnaps her in her vehicle. Thankfully, the woman escapes, and then LaPlante is found 48 hours later hiding in a dumpster. he's sentenced to 3 life sentences for the murders of Priscilla and her 2 young children. So to this day, he's actually still alive and in jail. He's never shown any remorse for any of his actions. Between 1988 and 2014, he actually tried to sue the courts and jail multiple times for violation of his rights.
Wow.
He tried to say that he was a Satanist and was denied his worship rights by the prison ward people.
Okay.
He's appealed the life sentences several times and had his final appeal denied in 2017, so 3 years ago. So it's official that he will be spending the rest of it. He'll die in jail. The saddest part of the story, though, was that the father of the wife and the 2 children who were murdered died in 2014, so he wasn't alive when the final appeal was denied, so he unfortunately passed away not knowing 100% that Daniel LaPlante would stay in jail forever.
Yeah. Okay. Man, but
so and he's still alive, and I looked it up. He's still alive and in jail to this day. Yeah. And he's like, it was 1986, so he's like 50 something now.
Yeah.
Late 40s, early, like your parents' age.
Yeah. It's crazy that there are a mix between people who commit these crimes that go to jail and spend life sentences in jail, and some show remorse for their actions, some decide that they can be released from jail but they choose to stay in jail.
Yeah.
And then there's just some people like Daniel LaPlante who just have no remorse for what they've done.
And he was 17.
Yeah.
When he killed 3 people. Well, 1 person, 2 children. But it's not even just kill. Like, shooting someone is one thing, but, like, kids don't drown themselves.
Yeah.
Like, you've had to hold them under the bathwater.
There's also a difference between
fucked up.
Shooting someone in the head, like, say, self-defense, or from, like, 6 feet away. But
like, point blank. And several times.
Yeah.
Like, dude, she's dead.
Yeah.
Once was enough. Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer of a story.
It's a huge bummer of a story. It's a classic case of the system failing these people who were murdered.
Like, I think it was because technically the only thing they could really charge him on was, like, trespassing, I guess.
Yeah, it's tricky because he didn't necessarily kill anyone, and what he was doing was wrong, but there's no, like, real implication to say you can go away for
and just kind of like
of
release him into society and be like, okay, off you go, daddy, try not to do anything wrong.
That's the thing that needs to be worked on is because it was the thing with the Making a Murder documentary had it with what's the
Stephen Avery.
That's it, Stephen Avery, where the real person who did the crime that he was accused of the rape and murder.
Oh, the original rape was like someone who'd been released, wasn't it?
And then committed another rape, and then now he can't be found anyway. He's gone.
Yeah.
Which is just a classic case of just again someone being arrested and then released, and they go off and do the exact same crime. You know, and the whole point of these whole prison systems is to rehabilitate someone to be released back into reality and to the modern society.
And it's also so crazy because it was in the late 80s, so this was really, like, obviously they still didn't have great technology and they still didn't have really good systems around, like, criminal profiling, but it was the time, like, when you actually look at all the, like, big serial killers, they were all between, like, 60s and 90s. Like, it was the golden time of the crazy serial killer. Like, come on, man. You got to know. Kid that looks like that. Yeah. You just look at him and go, you should not be in society.
You will not be a lawyer.
You are not going to be an upstanding member of society.
You know what's fucked up is I keep thinking of the 70s as like 30 years ago. And it's like 50.
Yeah.
At this point. It's fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
It's that.
That's like, what was I saying to you the other day when I see Oh, I was reading. They said it on this video I was watching. It was the 20th anniversary of American Psycho.
Yeah.
And when they said that, my brain was like,
fuck,
oh,
what?
like 1995. And I
Yeah.
was like, no, 2000.
2000.
There are adults who are the legal drinking age who were born in 2002.
Oh,
How fucked up is that? It makes me feel so old.
It's gross. I don't want to be living in this era anymore. I'm going to go back like 10 years.
I don't want to go back 10 years. It was not a good time for me in my teens. I go back to being like 22, 23. I feel like I peaked at like 23.
Yeah. Okay. Allow me to sip my wine before I transition into my deep dive segments of the podcast.
Yeah, you took like a lot of notes as well.
I did. So what I'll basically be doing is taking a deep dive into specific serial killers. And I won't necessarily cover every single aspect and like every detail with them. It'll probably be broken down into different episodes, like so maybe like a couple episodes later I might continue on this specific person. But for today, we will be taking a look at the notorious serial killer Son of Sam.
Just remember to put a showbiz twist on it.
A little
Make it entertaining.
Son of Sam.
Yes, I'd like you to do the entire presentation in cabaret style singing, please.
No.
Thank you.
We're not that kind of show. We don't get paid enough for
We
that
should
shit.
be that type of... Can you imagine that?
What, if we got paid to do that?
No, like a podcast about serial killers where they sang the
nothing
entire
but cabaret.
thing. Yes. Oh my God. You could make it like Riverdale where we have like a musical episode.
Ugh. God, no.
Like every season we have one musical episode where all we do is sing.
That's such a weird thing for a show like Riverdale.
I know. Riverdale's...
Makes no sense.
I've only watched like 4 episodes of the first season because I already got confused. Like just right out the gate, I got confused.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What was confusing about it?
Everything. I don't know why anyone does what they do. It makes no sense.
It's also loosely connected to the Sabrina universe.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's by the same creators, I think.
Yeah.
Which is fucked up because Sabrina is such a really interesting, spectacular story. Whereas Riverdale is kind of just a fucking mess.
Well, some people find Riverdale a spectacular story.
Yeah, but, I mean, it's not.
That's all I'm going to say on the topic. It's not.
Okay. I'm going to kick into the story of Son of Sam, which some people are aware of, most aspects of it.
I know bits about it.
Mindhunter delved into it quite a bit. Their casting for the Son of Sam was spectacular. Do you remember that? The actor they had in to play?
Oh, yeah, but their like casting
is
in
insane.
general is incredible.
So this information comes courtesy to obviously Wikipedia, Mindhunters, and YouTube's creator called Biographics. Thank you for all your extensive research for me to do research into your research, essentially.
So basically it's like the cliff notes of murder.
Yeah, kind of. Wow. That's a really interesting way to put
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Isn't it weird that we have this whole, like, part of society that just loves to do cliff notes on other people's works of murders of just like,
so we
serial
can all
killers?
be lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also mean like we are obsessed with serial killers, and it's like it's not just a thing like a thesis on some sort of mathematical problem or like archaeology. It's fucking serial killers.
Do you know what I find strange though? Like stranger than that is when I hear people that aren't interested in it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how?
What the fuck is wrong with you?
Like my manager at work finds it so strange that I listen to like My Favorite Murder and love to watch like true crime documentaries, and she's like, doesn't it like freak you out? And I'm like, no, it weirdly makes me feel like more prepared.
Yeah.
Like if someone was to kidnap me, I would know from my extensive true crime podcast listening how to I don't know.
I wouldn't know how to explain it, how to explain the fascination behind it. It just is a fascination.
Yeah, it's weird.
So you can't explain why. Okay.
Anyway, I'm going to try and stop interrupting you and let you.
So, Son of Sam, everyone knows him as the Satanist, committed a lot of murders in New York. Would love to send letters to police, love publicity, signed his letters off as Son of Sam, which...
Do we know why?
Yeah, and I will get into that.
Excellent.
So, Son of Sam's real name, his name he's referred to is David Berkowitz, but his name from birth is Richard David Falco. He was born on June 1st, 1953.
Falco.
Yeah,
That is
Falco's
the
a
coolest
sick
name.
name. He was born to his mother, Betty Broder, who had been previously married to a man called Tony Falco. Falco had left Broder for another woman, so Broder began a new relationship with a man named Joseph Kleinman. Broder and Falco already had a child together when Kleinman, before the separation and the relationship with Kleinman. When Kleinman found out that Broder was pregnant, he pressured her to give up the child for adoption.
Mm-hmm.
He also forbid Betty Broder from giving this child his last name. So instead, she used Tony Falco's last name, her former husband, to refer to him, and thus...
What a way to give a kid an identity crisis.
Yeah, Richard David Falco was born.
And I also feel like as soon as you use the word forbid in the context of a
marriage?
relationship,
Yeah.
it's like red flag alert. Unless you're like, I forbid you from like
Fucking other
eating your
people.
own poo or something. I
Yeah.
feel like that's a pretty good standard.
But even
rule.
that's just like a given, like just don't eat your shit.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to forbid you to do that.
Imagine that just like on a first date. Look, I just like to set
I have
some
a few ground
rules before we go on this date. I don't like people eating poo.
I don't like people who talk a lot. I forbid you from talking.
Yeah.
So a few days after Richard's birth, he was adopted by a middle-aged couple, Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz.
I love the name Pearl.
It's a quite nice name, isn't
It's
it?
so wholesome.
Yeah. I think it's mostly big. I get it from the drag queen Pearl. It's just a nice, simple name.
I
It's
just
also
think
like
it
an old
sounds...
bitty name.
Pearl and Peggy just sounds so like wholesome.
Yeah. So they lived in the Bronx in New York together. The Berkowitz couple owns a hardware store where Nathan Berkowitz spent most of his time working. He never grew close to David due to his work schedule, and he also felt the adoption was a mistake. So he never grew close to David. Pearl, however, was very close to David as he was her only son, and they developed quite an extensive relationship and came very close. Pearl often indulged David and let him get away with things he probably shouldn't have as a child. Either from this or just the way he was born and grew up, David developed into a hyperactive, mischievous child. He was quite a bulky kid when he was young and would use his size to exert power over other students, and showed little interest in school, often faking illnesses and coming up with excuses, and missed most of his school life. And what's funny is, to touch on something you mentioned earlier, where there's a kind of a pattern with a lot of serial killers with neglect and...
Did he have a head injury?
He had a head injury.
Yes.
He was hit by a car at 7 years old, suffering a head injury.
There's so many of them.
Yeah.
Like, there's this whole theory that, like,
Based on
serial
that,
killers are not born. Like, there's no person that's just born evil. Like, you either have childhood trauma that fucks you up, or you have, like, physical head injury. It's so interesting. Like, the more you read about it, the more you hear... Like, there was another serial killer, I can't remember which one it was, that fell off a swing as a kid. And then the swing, you know those real thick rubber ones that, like, hurt? The swing, as he was sitting on the ground, the swing came and whacked him right in the back of the head when he was a kid.
Rough. So after this injury, it's not clear if this had any long-term effects on David, but it's widely thought, as we were just saying, it's widely suspected that
Yeah, it's a
This
very
could be-
weird, like,
coincidence.
similarity that's like too many of them have it for it to be a coincidence.
Well, even soon after this injury, he started showing weird signs of a fascination with fire and arson. So he began burning bugs and then slowly progressed into small fires in his area. At this point, his adopted parents take him to a psychotherapist due to the whole arson aspect of his life. And at 14 years old, his mother, Pearl, passes away from breast cancer after fighting it for 2 years.
Oh, and she was like the only
Which
one
is-
that really like loved him.
She was
and paid
the
him
only
attention.
person that David was ever close with and had any kind of a relationship with. He
Mm.
was a completely introverted person, distant from everybody else, had no
Yes,
relationship
that's
with
like
his father.
the last sort of tie.
That was
gets cut.
what's often thought as the flipping upside down moment into Berkowitz's life.
tipping point.
The
Was
tipping
that-
point. Well, I guess, but his life was literally flipped upside down.
Yeah, I
Is
guess
what
so.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
get at. But a year later, he keeps progressively becoming more introverted, falls into a dark depression. He has still no relationship with his father, and even less so once his father remarries. His new stepmother is even more distant than his adopted father. The isolation culminating when his family relocates to Miami, Florida. No family, no family connection, no friends, just nothing.
Mm.
In 1971, when David turns 18, he joins the army and he's stationed in Korea. And
Oh, and that shit fucks you up.
yeah, he actually takes to the discipline quite well, supposedly, and becomes quite a good marksman. And 3 years later,
Which is unfortunate for anyone.
yeah, I mean, yeah. Which is fucked up considering he's killed people,
Yeah.
which is very bad
He
for
was
the
an
victims.
excellent shot. Never missed.
He had great training.
What was that? Sorry to interrupt. What's that? Oh my god, what show is it from? Where it's talking about? Oh fuck, I can't remember what show it is where they're talking about. And no one in my family has ever had any sort of mental health issues, except there was one uncle who was a little bit crazy, but even he had perfect eyesight, which was unfortunate for the people below the clock tower. What is that from?
I don't know. It's hilarious.
Oh, that's gonna annoy
I
me.
know.
I'm
Maybe
gonna,
it'll come to you later.
I'm gonna attempt to Google it
Look it
while
up.
I.
So he is honorably just discharged in 1974, 3 years later. After leaving the army, David moves to New York and lives alone. He's saved up quite a bit of money while he was in the army and enough to rent an apartment in the Bronx. And he starts taking classes at Bronx University. During his time in university, people remembered him as an angry, argumentative person who shunned association with others. He worked a few jobs such as security and driving a cab during this time as well. Though he was quiet, David quickly came to the attention of his local neighbors and the police department. He would often instigate petty disputes with them, which would then escalate to personal threats. An example of which was his downstairs neighbor, Charles Glassman, who was a deputy police sheriff, received 4 handwritten threats from Berkowitz during his stay in the same area as Glassman.
Something really spooky about
Handwritten
Handwritten
exactly,
threats.
yeah. Which actually, incidentally, comes into play later on in his, killing career. In his early 20s, Berkowitz reconnects with his birth mother, and his half sister Rosalind. He begins regularly visiting with his half sister Rosalind to his birth mother. However, once he finds out that Broda gave him up for adoption on request of her husband, he cuts ties with both women out of his life forever. never returns to visit them or gets in contact with them ever again.
Just quickly, it was How I Met Your Mother.
Yes.
When Robin meets Ted's mother for the first time, and he talks about how just be careful, she's going to start talking about marriage and kids, and then she doesn't, and like Robin freaks out. She's like, why don't you want me to have Ted's kids? Do you want to have Ted's kids? No, do you want to have my grandkids? No, but I want you to want me to have your Anyway, continue.
Yeah.
I just
We don't need the recite.
Or do they?
I don't know, maybe. Let's leave it in the comments if you want Laura to recite entire scenes from How I Met Your Mother.
Just read the entire transcript.
Yeah, why not? So he cuts ties with these two women out of his life forever. In around this time in 1974, around 1974, he starts to develop a fascination with fire again.
So 1974, so he's
the same
24?
He's math 23, I believe.
Okay.
Or yes. No, 21. I think.
Okay. I mean, it's not important. I'm just curious. Sorry.
I believe he's 21.
He's young.
Yeah. Over the next 3 years from 1974, he sets more than 1,500 fires around the city of New York. Over 3 years. 1,500.
Talk about a slow burner.
In his journal, he details each and every arson in detail, dubbing himself as the Phantom of the Bronx.
That's interesting.
Which doesn't exactly have the same ring to it as some Sam, which is like great that he makes a switch.
He's trying out different names, seeing what he feels comfortable with before he commits to actually murdering people.
You know, the 1975 were called Drive Like I Do before they landed on that name.
You know, that's what they say.
Not the same ring.
Start a fire, come up with a nickname.
Yeah. I think Maroon 5 were called something stupid before they were Maroon 5.
I thought you were going to say I think Maroon 5 used to start fires.
They might have. Adam Levine's
they start fires
hot
in the music industry.
Yeah. So obviously fire at arson gives him some sort of resemblance of control in his life, which is something that he is obviously lacking.
Crazy though. So you said 1,500 fires in 3 years.
In 3 years.
So like, if you actually do the math, that's more than a fire a day.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Because 1,500 divided by 3 is 500.
Yeah.
So that's more than there are days in the year. So that's more than a fire.
In
fire a
some
year.
form or another, he has a record of arson, lighting some sort of fire.
Crazy.
In 1975, he also starts to develop a fascination with Satanism. So he begins reading the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey, who is the founder of the Church of Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And he becomes convinced that he is controlled by evil spirits, which I'll get into. Maybe another episode I'll get into that whole conspiracy.
Because doesn't he not actually believe that?
Well, it's a thought.
Yeah.
But I'll probably get into that. I'll talk about that in a later episode to come.
Is Son of Sam? I won't spoil it, but is Son of Sam the dog one, or am I getting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
His first attack, detailed in 1975, Christmas Eve, he takes a hunting knife and
hunting knives
seeks
again.
out,
Hunting knife is like same
like the big
family
Bowie
of
knife.
like a hatchet. There's something so terrifying about it.
Vigorous and like harsh about it.
Yeah.
He takes a hunting knife out and looks to satisfy his murderous intents.
So you'd mentioned that he liked to light bugs on fire, but is there any other sort of like, did he like torture animals, or he like escalated literally to like killing people?
I mean, nothing yet. Oh, sure, he has like some sort of
because that's normally like you read that's like the general, they like escalate slowly.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because no, he doesn't really have that kind of lead up. It kind of just starts to surface, and then later on, I'll get into it. But basically, it's kind of like a reverse, or like a a mixed match. So 1975, Christmas Eve, he takes his hunting knife. His first victim of assault was a woman leaving a grocery store. He stabs her several times, but she manages to escape and survive. He then, later on that night, comes across 15-year-old Michelle Former, who he stabs 6 times before she fights him off and runs to a nearby apartment for shelter and survives.
She gets stabbed 6 times.
And survives.
I guess like getting, you say the word stabbed and you assume that's like, but you could get like stabbed in
She had
the arm
6
or
puncture wounds, so that just entails that she got stabbed 6 times.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't know how deep or
where they are.
where it is.
Yeah.
So then a month later, January 1976, he relocates from the Bronx to a rental house in the Yonkers.
In the where?
In Yonkers, not the Yonkers.
Yonkers. I love that.
You know what
Is
Yonkers?
that actually what it's called?
Yeah, it's in New York.
Yonkers. I love that.
It's like north of New York City, I believe.
It's my new favorite place.
It's cool. His landlord, who owns his property, also owns a German Shepherd that would bark incessantly, and he claims that
the dog die?
he claims that this dog was possessed by Satan, and the barking was orders for him to kill women.
This is the dog. Okay.
So working as a security guard night shift at the time, after 3 months, he gets fed up with the dog barking and decides to move to a different apartment in Yonkers. However, he can't seem to escape the barking of dogs. Wherever he goes, he can hear barking somewhere. So he took it as a sign that Satan was trying to drive him mad and forcing him to murder. So he develops a Molotov cocktail to try and kill the dog belonging to his neighbor, a man named Sam Carr. When he fails, he shoots the dog, killing the dog.
I hate it when the dog dies.
He convinces himself that the owner of the dog, Sam Carr, was possessed by the devil, and from him he dubs himself the Son of Sam.
Right.
Hence the name. So a couple months later, June 1976, he decides he needs a new method of murder because his first 2 botched attempts
He's
didn't
just
work out.
outgrown the hunting knife.
Yeah, the hunting knife didn't work out too well.
It's just not an efficient way to kill people.
He decides to build up an arsenal of a .44 caliber revolver, a Commando Mark III rifle, a Glenfield sniper rifle, a Charter Arms AR-7 shotgun, and a 12-gauge Deerslayer shotgun.
Jesus.
So he's building something up.
What's even more fucked up about the American system is it probably would have been like super easy for him to get all of those as long as he had a gun license.
New York back then too, I believe. I think it was legal for them to own to buy guns, but now it's like it's not a thing in New York. You can't legally buy guns. So during this time he quits his job as a security with security, starts working for a taxi company called Co-op City, which lasts no more than a month, I believe, and then he leaves that job, finds another one. But July 1976, he decides to strike again and leaves his home with a revolver in his paper bag. Right. He drives around, he's looking for a victim. He finds 18-year-old Donna Lauria and 19-year-old Jody Valenti talking in their car outside Donna's apartment. He walks to the passenger side, crouches down in a shooting position, grabs the .44 revolver with both hands, and empties the chamber into the passenger side of the car. Shoots both Donna and Valenti. However, Valenti survives, but Donna is killed with the fire.
Wait, what was her name? Valenti?
Jody Valenti.
Oh,
she survives.
Right. It's the surname. Okay,
and
gotcha.
Donna Lauria
right.
is killed. After this murder, he's filled with euphoria. He starts to build an addiction of the murder. 3 months later, in October, he decides to attack again. He's cruising around. Same idea, looking for a victim at night, driving around in his car in Queens. He spots 2 people in a red Ford Galaxy. And he notes that the woman, who's one of these 2 people, has long black hair, which he apparently finds attractive. He begins following both people in his car. Once they stop, he parks up behind them. The people he pulls up behind is 20-year-old Carl De Niro and 18-year-old date he has on the night, Rosemary Keenan. Now, Keenan was the daughter of an NYC police officer. And same method as last time. He walks up to the passenger side, empties the chamber, he fires 5 times, rather, into the passenger side. A bullet crashes into Carl's head, but Rosemary escapes unharmed, causing a commotion by honking the horn and trying to drive away. She escapes. David leaves the scene, and later on, Rosemary returns and drives Carl to the hospital. He survives and has
getting shot in the head.
Yeah, and doctors place metal plates into his skull.
Shit.
But he survives.
That's the other. There's a weird thing about getting shot in the head. Richard Romero shot a bunch of people in the head and they survived.
Yeah.
Like a shocking amount of people.
Sort of. It depends. I guess it depends on where
the head you get shot.
Your skull can literally bend a bullet around. Like it can stop a bullet.
Yeah, true. I guess you just get shot in the head and you assume like.
I guess if you get shot, say like on the outside of your temple, and it sort of skims around your skull.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a skull fracture, but nothing's gonna affect your grey matter.
That's true.
A month later, he strikes again. Joanne Lamino and Donna DeMasi, 2 teenagers, are walking home from the movies. David Berkowitz follows them, and as they stand at the stoop of Joanne's house, just talking to each other, he opens fire on them. Bullets tear through both of the teenage girls, and neither of them are killed. However, Joanne was paralyzed from the waist down.
Oh, that's sad. So he's escalated from 3 months apart to 1 month apart.
1 month apart.
Yeah.
Now, in January 1977, which is, I believe, like the next year over. So he has a few more months.
Right.
Where he waits.
Okay.
He shoots and kills Christine Freund, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Christine Freund, who was sitting in her car, same as the first few victims. And then later on in March of the same year, he kills 20-year-old Bulgarian immigrant Virginia Voskerikian.
So these are all women, apart from the
one man.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. She was walking home from Columbia Uni when she came face to face with David Berkowitz, and he shoots her point blank in the face, and then leaves her to die. Walks away.
Shit.
April 1976. No, that's not right. Sorry. April 1977 of the same year. He attacks Valentina Sarayan and Alexander Sau, who he shoots in the car again from the passenger side. Surani dies at the scene. Sau later dies hours later.
You've got to think for cars as well.
It's parked cars at the front of apartments or wherever they are.
The Zodiac Killer had a thing for cars too, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's that they're literally sitting ducks in their car. They can't move. They can't go anywhere. So it's an easier target for him. However, this murder is different as police find a letter left behind by the killer. The letter reads, and I quote, "I am a monster. I am the son of Sam. I feel like an outsider. I am on a different wavelength than everybody else. Programmed to kill. However, to stop me, you must kill me. I am the monster, Beelzebub, the chubby behemoth. I love to hunt. Prowling the street, looking for fair game, tasty meat. The women of Queens are the prettiest of all."
Gross.
So by now,
That's so like weirdly complimentary, but
yeah,
creepy at the
but
same
very
time.
creepy. By now, the whole of New York is in an uproar. So people are freaking
Yeah,
the
as you
fuck
would
out.
be.
The most interesting thing I found about this whole ordeal. So it's like, what is it? 1977. He starts the attacks. He starts the attacks in 76. So he's got a year's worth of attacks, pretty much. New York's freaking out. There's the fear within New York set for like the next attack happening leads to a rush of handgun sales and emptying of nighttime entertainment venues.
Okay.
The most interesting of all is due to the majority of the victims being long, dark-haired women, overnight hairstyles changed. So women were cutting their hair, dyeing their hair, trying to look nothing
trying
like
to not be
this
like
type.
Because
Most of the victims were long, dark hair. So coverage went global. The attacks continued with regularity soon after. The next being in June 1977, Judy Placide, 17 years old, and Sal Lupo, 20, both sitting in Lupo's car when Berkowitz attacks. Both survive the attack, however. But then later on in the next month over, July, he attacks Bobby Violante and Stacy Moskowitz, both 20 years old and shot in the head. Stacy dies 2 days later after being in critical condition, and Violante survives, however, losing 90% of his vision. Now, the important thing about Stacy Moskowitz is she was the very last victim that the Son of Sam ever killed.
Okay.
So, March 30th.
So how many people did he actually kill?
I didn't write it down. I'm sure it's somewhere. But it's like, I think ballpark, like 7, 8. Like a lot. A lot of people he killed.
This kitten just... I don't know if you can hear her constant...
You can hear.
She's having a sook because she keeps trying to climb onto the kitchen table and I keep stopping her and she's not impressed.
March 30th, 1977. Famous New York Times writer Jimmy Breslin receives a handwritten letter from someone who has signed the letter as Son of Sam. The letter reads, and I quote, "Mr. Breslin, sir, don't think that because you haven't heard from me in a while that I went to sleep. No, rather, I am still here, like a spirit roaming the night, thirsty, hungry, seldom stopping to rest, anxious to please Sam. I love my work. Now the void has been filled. Perhaps we shall meet face to face someday, or perhaps I will be blown away by cops with smoking 38s." End. Breslin contacts the police with this letter. And from the letter, they noticed it contains details relating to crimes not yet released to the public. So they decide
they know it's from him.
Yeah. But they decide to let the New York Times publish some of the details pertaining to these crimes. And accompanied by Breslin's response for Son of Sam, which is it's basically long-winded response urging him to turn himself in. And this was to spread awareness of the Son of Sam. And now that like it was confirmed that it was from him, they're releasing the some of the details from the murders, from the crimes. That copy of the New York Times sold over 1 million copies.
That's a lot.
So after this, New York Police Department formed Operation Omega, which was supposedly the most comprehensive investigation in its history.
Okay.
300 detectives work around the clock. On the night of Moskowitz and Violante's shooting, a woman named Cecilia Davis was walking her dog when she saw an officer ticketing a young man in a car parked alongside a fire hydrant. And she remembers it distinctly because soon after, she saw the same man who was being ticketed walk past her, staring at her menacingly. And it was enough to freak her out that she ran home.
Yeah.
Because you got to remember, during this time,
people are freaking out. So
they're
things
freaking
like
out from
that
this murder.
would
People are
stick
changing
in
their
your
head.
head. Yeah.
So anyone, it's like with the, I kind of like to relate it to now, like the virus. This whole pandemic is causing people just to sort of stay a little bit further away from people. It's just due to the times. So after the murder happens, that night, afterwards she decides to contact the police, and the police department decide to bring in every single driver who was ticketed that night in for questioning, including David Tama Sam himself.
So sorry, did she see the man that was being ticketed the same night that he stared at her?
Yeah.
Okay.
So later on that night, he walks past her,
right,
and is staring at her, and that's why she remembers him being ticketed, because it was the same man. Okay. So detectives try calling David with no answer. With no answers at all, they decide to contact the Yonkers police station to try to get help into contacting him. There's the dispatcher that the detective is talking to, incidentally, happens to be the daughter of Sam Carr, former neighbor of Son of Sam.
And did they remember him being a weirdo, or?
So he decides to interview Sam Carr, who remembers David as the man who, and informs the detective as David is the one who shot his dog.
Jesus. Yeah, because you wouldn't forget that.
No, fuck no. So he's describing him physically and psychologically, and the profile matches almost perfectly with the profile of the Son of Sam.
Yeah.
So slowly, well, actually not slowly, quickly, evidence starts building against Son of Sam quickly. And suspected arson that was reported close to David's apartment. Police decide to interview his former neighbor, Charles Glassman, who was the...
Is he the one with the German Shepherd?
He was the one with the German Shepherd, the former landlord of his. And Glassman shows the detective all of the threatening letters that David had sent to him
about his
while
dog.
he was living. So then, August 10th, 1977, detectives find his Ford Galaxy parked outside his apartment, his current apartment.
Yeah.
Without a warrant, they decide to search his car. Backseat, there's a duffel bag with a sniper rifle in it. In the glove compartment, there's a handwritten letter addressed to the Suffolk County Police Department. I'm really bad with American pronunciation.
No, Suffolk was right.
Suffolk, yeah. Warning them of a coming attack at a local disco that he was planning on visiting and murdering someone. One officer decides to leave to get a warrant, while the other remains by the vehicle in case he shows up. And he hails down a civilian to park in front of David's car in case he comes back, just to kind of park him in and keep him there. While this is happening, SWAT team is deployed.
Imagine being that civilian.
Yeah, you're like, hey, we're trying to catch a murderer.
You'd be like, why am I parking this person in? We can't tell you that. Well, am I in danger? I can't tell you that either.
I can't disclose this information. So a SWAT team is deployed around the area, and at 10:30 p.m., David decides to enter his car. The detective taps on his window. David rolls down his window slowly, looks at him, and says, and I quote, "Well, you got me. How come it took you such a long time?"
Oh, imagine being that cop.
Just fucking chills. So he admits to all the attacks, like all of them.
Have they made a movie about this?
No, they should.
They need to.
So he admits to every single one of the attacks, not just the murders, the attacks, the first two, everything. And And on August 11th, 1977, he's charged with second-degree murder of Stacy Moskowitz. He pleads guilty to all 6 counts of murder against his lawyer's wishes. His lawyer wanted him to plead insanity.
But he kind of like wanted to go to jail by the sounds of it.
He did, and I think which I'll get into afterwards, like another time. But he had a time where he was trying to plead insane due to like while he was in prison, he was trying to plead that he was insane, and like he's telling his psychologist that he was insane due to the whole murderous Satan dog. But he pleads guilty to all 6 counts, and he's sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences. And what's really interesting is
this guy. Sorry, I just looked up his photo. What's
really interesting is same as with your story. He's in prison to this day.
Oh, is he still alive?
Still alive. Yep.
Shit.
What's interesting and almost a complete 180 of what was your guy's name again?
Daniel LaPlante.
Daniel LaPlante. He was he could have been released on bail. No.
Good behavior.
I think he could have been released on good behavior after like 2 years, I believe.
No.
Something like that. Like he spent a few years in jail, and he had the chance to leave, but decided that he wanted to stay in jail. This is the part I haven't researched too much, so I don't know exact specifics. I know while he was in jail, he was referred to as Berkowitz because he was insane and angry and Satanist and would like not get along with anyone at all. However, during his prison sentence, he becomes a born-again Christian.
Well, that's interesting. I'm looking at his photo like now of his...
What's hilarious?
He just looks like the old dude next door who would like help you mow your lawn.
What's funny is when he was arrested, people were disappointed with the way he looked.
They were
expecting like a Ted Bundy.
He doesn't have like crazy eyes. He just looks like...
They were expecting like this real dark, twisted looking person who would be like a Ted Bundy kind of person. Or
like he kind of looks a little bit like my Uncle Colin.
Yeah. But he becomes a born-again Christian, and at some point during his sentence, I'm not too sure when it was during his sentence, but it was while he was a born-again Christian.
Yeah.
Amidst all the wrongdoings, he says he feels great remorse for what he's done. And he was allowed to leave prison at some point, and every 2 years, I think it was since 2002, he was allowed to leave, I believe.
And he's just willingly...
He's willingly like, I don't want to leave. Like, I cannot leave. I've done a wrong thing. I will die in prison. And I will live with my...
He also may not like trust himself to not do it again.
No, that's the thing. Is like, I have seen the light with God, and I like, know what I've done is wrong, but I can't be let out. I can't be trusted.
Wow.
It's fucking fascinating.
I really didn't know that much about the story of Son of Sam, apart from the fact that he tried to say initially it was a dog and then recanted on that. So
he said a dog that was possessed by Satan was telling him to kill women.
But then he told that, came out and said that was all a lie, didn't he?
Which is, I'll probably get into that and do a bit more research into that, maybe a later episode, because that's a whole thing in itself. That's a lot to get into. But yeah, that's essentially it. He tried to play it off as...
It was not me, it was the dog.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't me. It was Satan who possessed this dog who told me to do this.
Interesting.
So
We've
that
been
is
going
the
for
story.
2 hours.
I think it's only been an hour, because I saw it started at 1.
Yeah, I was going to say, it does not feel like we've been going for 2 hours.
But yeah, that's the story of Son of Sam.
I really liked that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't like it.
That was my favorite one.
I'd
love to get into Ed Kemper at some point.
Oh my God. I kind of want to do Ed Kemper.
We'll do Ed Kemper next episode. So we're going to be doing this every single Thursday. every single Thursday, motherfuckers.
Yeah, we've committed. By next Thursday, we will have a name.
Yep. Well, by
Um,
this episode coming out, we'll have a
Oh,
name.
yeah.
Which, by the way, we don't have a name for this show yet, but we will. We will have a name for it. It still falls under the mother group of Bored Millennials, but it will have its own unique name to distinguish it from the big collective that is Bored Millennials podcast. So I guess next week I'll talk about Ed Kemper, maybe. What? Why you?
I want to talk about Ed Kemper.
Okay, well, I mean,
I love
that's
Ed.
not your
I
thing.
don't love Ed Kemper.
Well,
What do you mean it's not my thing? I wanted to do a true crime podcast.
All right, well, you can talk about...
I'll talk about whatever the fuck I want to talk about.
Oh, wow.
Can't tell me what to do.
Bitch. All right, well, you can talk about Ed Kemper. Maybe I'll talk about the Manson family.
Yeah, We've been joined by the second child.
Christ. What do you want? That's what I thought. Okay, well, anyway, we'll have... We'll have our topics decided for next week. But this is really fun. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah. Also, just as a footnote for anyone who doesn't personally know us, because I feel like to begin with, it's probably going to just be our friends listening to this.
Yeah.
We have 3 cats. So if this podcast...
Jesus Christ. The fuck?
Tama just had a technical difficulty with his
My
mic stand.
microphone attacked me, trying to stab you in the neck.
So it's like highly likely that our podcasts are going to be regularly interrupted by one of our cats.
Yeah. If not meowing, like jumping on the fucking table and knocking things over, or some sort of friggin' nuisance. There'll be something.
Yeah, so we've got Pie, Toffee, and Peach. Pie is our eldest.
He's a kilo overweight, apparently.
Toffee is our golden middle child.
Yeah, she's a good
And
girl.
Peach is the naughty little kitten who just cannot do
Currently
what
playing
she's
with
told.
a mic cable as well.
Like a noose wrapped around her neck.
Yeah, good on you. So yeah, this won't be replacing the other podcast. We're trying to work out something with the whole quarantine. Maybe we'll do something on Zoom. We'll work something out, but we'll resume that. Figure something out, and in the meantime, this show will be every Thursday. As for the collective one with everybody, I don't know. It'll kind of just, for now, it's weird to do because it's other people, and you and I live together, and it's easy to do a show together. But fucking
Wait, you live here?
yeah.
Since when?
I sleep on the couch.
Wow. Who gave you a key?
Do you think I could sleep in the bed tonight, honey?
We'll see.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, swag. We'll figure something out.
I feel like we should end this on like a talk about something happy.
Positive? Yeah. What has been something positive that's happened?
Yeah, it's all a bit like doom and gloom.
It is very doom and gloom
At the moment. We've discovered, like the old people that we are, we've discovered TikTok.
Oh yeah,
That's been kind of fun.
That's been great.
Making stupid TikToks.
We've been fucking addicted to
I've
making
never felt
TikToks.
so old in my life, but
No.
I am enjoying myself regardless.
It's been really fun. Just every day making like some sort of meme or something. Or you're trying for a bit of a slightly more serious approach.
Well, yeah, I'm doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Which everything I've read says like, oh, you should find your niche. Like, but I don't have a niche. My niche is me.
You
I
should
am
cook your
my
quiche,
niche.
Samantha.
It's not a niche, it's a miche.
It's a me.
It's just me.
So yeah, follow us on TikTok at Laura
Elise Studio.
And you can follow me at WulfLD. That's WULFLD. And yeah, that's where our kind of focus is at the moment, as well as looking after our latest baby.
Yeah,
She's
she's been a handful.
a fucking nuisance. She's currently licking my finger. Hello. This is Kitty ASMR right now. Say anything? Go on. Thank you for embarrassing me in front of dozens of people.
That's bold of you to assume that 12 people are going to listen to
We actually
this.
get a decent amount of plays
Well, there you
without
go.
advertising it that much. Cool. All right, let's wrap it up there. Check out our TikToks for memes because these trying times are very, difficult and sad, and people are passing away, and it's really not a good time. But I feel like it's kind of.
I think we've managed to start to flatten the curve.
Yeah,
here,
and I feel like it's sort of
which is
showing
good.
us all as a community. A lot of people are really coming together, and
Yeah.
celebrities are really starting to put in some hard work to do something about it. Like Ethan Klein from H3 is giving away $100,000 to just people who are struggling, I believe. Something like that. But yeah, thank you for joining us on this new show that we're working on. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of fun with other future.
You just whacked a head on the coffee table.
Oh no, she's gonna turn into a serial killer now. Okay, well, I think we're gonna go.
Okay. Thanks for listening and tuning in.
Yeah, thanks, gang. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.